Hey, greetings. It's Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Um, Fresh back from a trip out of state. Had some background stuff I was dealing with. I need to apologize to whoever's the force or whatever. I was gonna put on some footage from Selawik of that hairy man walking across the tundra or whatever, but I can't find that footage um, already edited. The raw footage is just other people's information's on there, so I don't wanna put that out there, so I have to re-edit that. So be patient, I'll have it out on the next one. um Thank you to Daryl down in Sitka. Bro, them herring eggs are off the chain. I sincerely appreciate it. Herring eggs on kelp, man, is a superfood. It's just awesome stuff. What I want to share with you guys today comes from a guy in his mid-50s. His name's Blake, and about 6 years ago, he asked his uncle, who hadn't hunted in many years, if he could proxy hunt for him because he knew his uncle liked caribou. And so, his uncle says, I don't like the thought of you going out hunting for me. He was real cryptic in his responses, kind of like, uh, not giving him a definite answer. So finally, Blake cornered his uncle, and his uncle finally agreed, okay, I'll let you hunt for me. I just don't like the idea of you going out in the woods for me. And Blake's like, no, I'm going for me, but if I'm going to be there, I might as well harvest you something. I know you love caribou. So they figure all the stuff out. They get their paperwork turned in for the proxy hunt permission and all that kind of stuff. Well, his uncle, upon leaving, warns him about hunting south of Sweet Lake, south of the North Fork of the Golcana, which I've shared, I think, 5 experiences from this area. Which boggles me that more people don't come forward, but I understand. So he was further south than everyone else. He didn't stay in the shanty town. He went out, and he found this little honey hole where he saw a bunch of moose, and figured, all right, well, the moose are down over here. I think I'll go over this way and see if I can find some caribou, which is heading back north towards the Denali Highway. So he gets on his four-wheeler. It was about the second morning, he said, and that morning he said it was odd. All the moose were acting really weird. Uh, some were walking in circles and then looking north, walking in a circle and then looking north, and he never seen that behavior before. So he makes his way pre-light, and it wasn't as cold as Blake would like it to be hunting. He liked it real crispy, and he knew the animals would be moving. Well, he gets up north, he finds this little cut, he gets up on this little step, and he's walking around, and he notices it's an old game trail. And, there's depressions in there that he thought were old double bear step prints, and just left it at that. He was hunting with a 7mm Magnum, which is a stout round, definitely drop moose or caribou. And he goes around and he finds this little patch of alder willows, and he kind of creates this little opening to where he has a line of sight over this little piece of marsh down below him for when the caribou come through. The wind was in his favor. He felt really good about it. So he's sitting there for about an hour before daylight, and he just kept hearing weird noises, like a weird grunting sound. And so he starts looking off in the distance. He's glassing, and he's glassing the edge of the black spruce that kind of about, he guesstimated about 800 yards out. And as he's glassing and looking along, he sees a cow moose come out. The cow moose comes out and is almost trotting towards him. So he's like, oh, he had already got his moose, so he wasn't out for moose, but he was just watching what was unfolding in front of him. A bull moose, a young bull moose, barely above spike and fork, barely had little paddles. It wasn't a mature bull. Well, it follows her out. And so he's watching, and he's just curious by it because, nature's unfolding before him, and no caribou yet, so he's just watching. Well, on this step that he was on, down below him were these another thick patch of alder brush. And it was quite a bit of a step. Once he walked around and found his spot, it kind of started off kind of slightly sloped, and then as he walked around it, it really stepped off. And then those alder brushes kind of wrapped around, and he was kind of quasi on a bend on this step where he was looking out. So he's sitting there just bored. There's no caribou yet. It's not very cold, so he's kind of, you know, kind of milling around. He's glassing these moose, watching them. And he's hearing this grunt still, but he realizes that grunt isn't coming from the moose several hundred yards out. It's coming from that step down below. And so he kind of gets curious, and he's like, I don't want to blow my cover, because if a caribou's coming along, me coming out, you know, I could possibly get winded, spook them, so I'm just going to sit tight. So he's in this little cubby, and he's barely inside the brush, just enough to see out, and he keeps listening. And the cow moose is trotting almost at a full run towards where he is. So he thought, what the hell's going on here? The bull moose is chasing because it's in season, so he's trying to chase him a piece, but as they cover about half the distance, the bull moose immediately busts a U-turn and hauls ass out of there. And it really struck him as funny, because this moose is in rut. You know, the moose wanted to get his, and he gave up, right, like real easily, and there was no other bulls around, so Blake was confused, like, man, what the hell is this? And he keeps hearing this grunting sound, and it's more aggressive, and then he hears this low gurgling, like growl, roar kind of sound. He's like, what that must be a bear. I must be over a bear kill that's down below me, and I didn't even know it. So his curiosity, he didn't want to stay where he was, so he figured, well, if there's a bear here, there ain't no caribou coming, so I'm just gonna go and take a look. You know, I'm here, it's happening, why not take a look? So he, quietly as he can, crawls out, goes back around a little bit, starts back to where it slopes down a little easier, and he comes down to where he's on the same plane as the cow moose. And at this point, because he had to backtrack, he's about 300 yards from where this cow moose was running straight in to where his position was up on the hill. As he said, as soon as he came off the trail he was on and was on the same plane and started walking towards the cow moose to see what was going on, he said there was something strange in the air. He'd been out, lifelong hunter, he'd been out several times, and he equates it to like being immediately next to a bear, but there was nothing around in the moment. And I asked him, I was like, well, that feeling, what did it feel unjust or unnatural? And he said, not in that moment, no. As he continued forward, he was kind of doing a stalk. He was spotting, okay, the cow is still standing there, and the cow was acting really weird. It would take a couple steps forward, acting aggressive with its ears back, and then it would back off. And this low growling, gurgling sound was continuing. So in his line of view, he couldn't see what the cow could, so he decided he's gonna just flank to his left, stay low, and hopefully the wind stays in his favor enough to get an eye on what this bear is doing, because in his mind he thought it was a bear. So he does this little half moon thing, and he's still about 200 yards out, and he gets into a position where he sees something dark just inside the alders, and the cow looking in its direction, still acting, the cow was acting aggressive, but wasn't coming forward to go and stomp the bear like you normally would see. So he's glassing, and it's still dark enough to where he can't see into that shadow. So he's like, man, I'm gonna get a little closer. I'm gonna take a chance. I'm gonna get a little closer. I'm armed. You know, I'll be a good enough distance away to put some shots on a bear if it's charging over its kill or whatever. He was just really, really curious about what was going on. So he, little by little, is making his way through these little, in the tundra, you gotta understand, there's little troughs in between, and it's uneven ground. So he's taking his time, slowly getting closer. He said he closed the gap about 100 yards, and slides up and peeks over, and he sees movement, and the cow moose is kind of sidestepping out of his view, out of the view she was blocking of what he was trying to look at. And as soon as she was clear of it, she charged forward a little bit and then backed off again, and was just all bristled up, ears back, and just making this weird noise, making a call. And he brings up the binoculars again. It was still so dark he couldn't really see what was going on. All he saw was something dark in there, and it was moving back and forth. Then he heard the gurgling growl again. As he was getting his rifle scope up, because it had a little further reach than his binoculars, he was pulling up his rifle. As soon as he pulled his rifle up and put his scope over on it, this thing stood up, and he said guesstimating by the size of the brush and this thing's height, he was guessing about 10 foot tall. And he said he was immediately thrown off because he had never seen a bear that big. Grizzly bears usually don't get 10 foot tall. Coastal brownies will, because they got all that salmon to eat, but interior grizzlies, they maybe max out 700 pounds for a really good size one. So he was confused at this thing's size. He's like, man, that's a big bear. Still, it was all silhouetted. He couldn't make any definition. So he figures, all right, well, I'm going to try to get a little closer since I'm still at a safe range to get shots on this thing. He again does his little crawl thing. And as he got about 3 more mounds of tundra closer, he started getting a sinking feeling like, this is a bad idea. So he decides, what I'm going to do is show myself fully and make some noise and disrupt nature and see what I can see, because his curiosity just had him. Well, he does that. He stands up and starts yelling, hey, hey. He's waving his rifle back and forth and, making himself bigger. Cow moose doesn't pay him one lick of attention at all. Like he did not exist. However, the dark shadow paid attention to him. Let out this blood-curdling scream, holler, growl, all in unison, just all combined. And Blake said that he had an episode. We both laughed about it. He said I could share this portion. So he wet himself. It startled him so badly. He had been drinking coffee all morning and sitting there holding it in hopes for a caribou, and had a full bladder when this happened. So he wet himself from the startle of it. And he said when that scream happened, this thing came out of the shadows and more into the light. And it wasn't necessarily full on light yet, but he could see a big hulking black thing in the shape, a humanoid shape. He said it was still about 120-ish yards out, roughly. Him trying to remember the adrenaline dump was very, very heavy. He had almost a half a mile to get to his wheeler to get out of there. So he still had to go on foot. Luckily not towards this thing, but away from it. But still, all this is transpiring. He was, still had to make an exit. He said he lowered down, shaking really hard, grabbed his rifle, made sure he was locked and loaded, and yelled out, hey, hey, I'm over here, right? Just saying stuff. It made no sense. He even admitted it made no sense. He just wanted to make noise, human noise, and see what happens, right? See if this thing will go away. He didn't feel comfortable turning his back and trying to run away and kind of spark some predatory response. So he was just, honestly, it really freaked out. He said he was shaking really hard. He couldn't bring himself to put the rifle up to his shoulder, any of that. He was really freaked out. Well, this thing, after the scream and stuff, the cow moose had backed off a little bit. And this thing, after the scream, turned around, walked back towards the brush, and then picked up. And then he realized why the cow moose was acting that way. The thing was eating its calf. And that was the noises he was hearing. This thing was eating this moose calf. And this thing basically took the moose calf, had its whole head in its hand, he said, and just nonchalantly walked off to his left. And the cow moose trotted along a little ways and then turned off and then went back towards the tree line behind them, where she had come out with that young bull coming after her. So what he suspected is this thing got her calf. She retreated. This young bull moose, not knowing any better, being in season, followed her back, realized what was going on, got the hell out of Dodge, and with Blake not knowing what was going on up above, came down and figured it all out. He said he couldn't give any detail other than big dark silhouette moving away, and as soon as it was far enough away that he thought it couldn't catch up very quickly, he made his escape. He made his exit. On a side note, he didn't tell anyone else because they hunted as a group but separately. Blake picked his spot, and his other two buddies picked their spots in different areas. They didn't want to all be in one area hunting together, so they all picked their areas there. Well, on his way back to his camp, he was thinking, I need to tell, so I need to share this with my buddies or whatever. He gets back to camp and he ends up not sharing it. He holds on to it. The trip was basically ruined for him. Weather came in. It was just real horrible for hunting. His buddies showed up and was like, hey, we want to pack it in. So he agreed. He didn't want to be there either. He was just trying to figure a good excuse. He thought about faking appendicitis, just all sorts of stuff, because he didn't want to look weak in front of his friends. And I get it. I get it. So he gets home and he goes and tells his uncle. And his uncle looked at him and said, damn it, I knew it. I didn't want you to go hunting for me. And his uncle seemed mad. And he was like, hey, I'm trying to tell you something here. He goes, I saw something similar, not killing a moose or anything, but I saw a figure similar. And that's why I stopped hunting. That's why I didn't want you going hunting for me. And that was such a strange coincidence. You know, his uncle dealt with something similar that stopped him from hunting. Blake, trying to be a good guy and look out for his elder, want to get him some fresh caribou meat, has a similar experience. So anyone else out there that have been hunters that hunt south of the Denali Highway, if you've seen something similar, please fill us in. I can't necessarily say that that's a hot spot for activity, because that's this cliche shit. It seems random, but in the same area, different years, miles apart. So keep that in mind. There's not a hairy man behind every bush. I don't want people getting that impression. I just want them to understand these things they occur in random places at random times, especially up here. I mean, you can see it's turning green a little bit, but it's still dense as hell. If you look, there's just, and with the leaves and stuff sprouting, it's only going to get thicker, you know. I want to thank Blake for sharing. I sincerely appreciate you making the time and effort. I know I was out of state, man. It made it hard to communicate and stuff, so I sincerely appreciate you taking the time to make it happen. And again, thank you to Daryl down in Sitka, man. I'm going to have some more of that herring eggs on kelp here in a minute. And Borealis Bigfoot Convention coming up June 10th and 11th. Meet and greet the 9th at the Hoodoo Brew House or something, some brewery in Fairbanks or whatever. For tickets or information on that, borealisbigfoot.com, I believe it is. Again, I want to thank Blake for coming forward, and I want to thank all the new subscribers for joining us. And we have, now that it's spring officially, there's more adventures to come out in remote Alaska. So stay tuned, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.